Is this mic on? Let's do this. All right, everyone. Welcome back to Brain Advisors live podcast on Monday night, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. We're here to grow the conversation about positive psychology at work. Really wanting to know what's going on out there about this. Is it just another fad? We sincerely doubt it. We want people to feel comfortable and feel open to talk about using what is now known as the science of human optimization, more or less, at least getting in a better state of mind, a more positive outlook, more optimized behavior, and the tools that come along with that. So we want to know, how are you doing at work? What are your stories? The good, the bad. We invite you to come on, share your stories so that we can converse. And it's all about growing this conversation. Today's episode is all about positive psychology as a brand. We want to better understand, are there stigmas attached to positive psychology? Does the average person know what what psychology was actually meant to achieve as its mission? We'll cover some other topics like we talked about mental health standards in our previous podcast. We'll talk more about that. And we're really hoping to engage with the audience to hear their stories about how is the conversation around anything psychological taken at work. Are you so shy that you would never even bring up simple discussions like, I'm not feeling that up for it today. Perhaps something in your personal life occurred. Perhaps something right there and then in a meeting had happened. My background's technology, so it's always about this conversation of people are not tech. We are human beings. We're organic. So we want to keep bringing that up. And today we have a special guest as well, Martyn. I'll unmute you for a second so that you can chime in and give us a little bit of your bio and what you're going to do today here. We're excited to hear about your stories. You've recently been in India, but I want our viewers and our listeners to get a bit of your background.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks. Great to be here, Jason. And so my background is, first of all, as a teacher. And then from a teacher, I loved being in the outdoors. So I started various guiding businesses and ended up guiding, extreme guiding around the world. So North Pole, South Pole, Everest. I'm actually the first person to lead expeditions to the three extremes. So for many years, I was guiding often millionaires, billionaires, highly successful people, but also I worked in mental institutions, guiding people from institutions. I worked in jails, guiding people from jails into nature. So I really had a huge breadth of human experience. And then after those experiences, did a global youth project, was all about leadership. And then more recently, I've been working as a trainer and in leadership and corporate leadership, corporate training. So the whole aspect of positive psychology, I come at it from, first of all, more a sports angle, and then more an extreme angle. But I see that it's totally foundational to human success, is my take on it. It really is totally foundational to human success. So I've also spent 7 years in and out of India, literally teaching monks about meditation, enlightenment, and things like that.
So I thought they were teaching you, but you're teaching them. That's great.
That's right. Yes.
Well, I like that you brought up the sports psychology, because one thing I want to kind of share with our viewers, and for those who are just joining in, once again, I'm Jason, the host of today's podcast, and we're talking about positive psychology as a brand. What I know is that when people hear the term positive psychology, they don't really understand that it is all-encompassing of all bodies of knowledge within the research of psychology, meaning it is from sports psychology, it is from neuroscience, it is from behavioral, it is from business. It's quite overarching. It's just what is there to make us grow, what is nurturing us, what is supporting us to be our best at that any particular time. So I know I came across several studies, qualitative and quantitative, in reference to Mount Everest climbers, and how they did that because they wanted to study the mindsets of these individuals, what kept them going. So we're looking at performance endurance. And if you translated that to the office space, as an IT project manager, you got to go the distance. You got to make sure you deliver. Sometimes you have some really hard obstacles, which I'm sure is the same on the mountain, and you need to know how to get through them. So this is why we look to the research. Are there any stories you have that you can share that are kind of were really really attached to a lesson learned in reference to this what we're calling positive psychology? But I understand we use different flavors, and we'll talk about that throughout the podcast. But just in reference to a practice, were there any particular practices that you held on to all the time when doing these extreme sports in order to help you succeed?
Yeah, totally. What I really see is that one of the differences between, say, being an IT manager and an Everest climb is that an Everest climb is a shorter period of time. And so the goal is more tangible. And it seems like, but it's only in our mind's eye the goal is tangible. We can make anything tangible or intangible in our mind's eye, right? Mm-hmm. And so when the goal is very, like it's 3 months, it'll be over, I'll be back, I'll be back in my more normal, comfortable environment. So let me push hard for the moment because I know I'm going to get a break later on. So all those sorts of things allow us to, to really push ourselves. Whereas I think in an office environment as an IT manager, we see years and perhaps years stretching out in front of us. But that's only again in our mind's eye. So if we apply what I'm saying is that it would be breaking down. So the mountain analogy would be, okay, short-term focus, keep the focus, keep going, keep going. I mean, for instance, on Everest, for instance, I'll give you an example. We wake up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and lying in bed, our pulse rates are like 100. We get up and we're at 120, and all we've done is stood up, right? We bend over, compress our lungs, now we're up to 130, and we haven't taken a step, right? So, and then we start moving on the mountain, and we're just moving super slowly, really crawling along, and it's cold, etc., etc. So all the mind noise that can come in about, what am I doing here? This is stupid.
And there's no distraction up there either, right? It's just you and your mind. What are you gonna do?
That's the other part of it, yes, yeah. But that in some ways serves us. I think the no distraction aspect of it does help at times, Whereas I think in an office environment, first of all, unless we do chunk it out, very consciously. So the unconscious way of approaching the office thing is, hey, I'm here for the next 20 years, and we unconsciously make it into drudgery, right? Mm. Whereas when we apply consciousness to it, it's like, oh, what are my goals here? I'm doing this so I can have time off on the weekends, so I can do this, so I can do that, so I can, just as the same as Everest, we're doing it for a reason. And when we're very clear about the reasons we're doing work, then we shift work over from being drudgery to being purposeful, meaningful, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm. So you see, and these are all the terms that would come out of the research world of positive psychology. There's heaps of research out there on meaning and purpose. It's actually part of the well-being model that Martyn Seligman has put forth, that, meaning and purpose, money's not a big motivator to everyone. There's a certain amount, and this is also research around, I believe it's 70,000 in most first world nations. After that, it's nothing else is going to make you more happy, despite popular belief, despite popular marketing. And this is why we're here talking all about the marketing. So if I asked you, when you're in the corporate worlds and you're talking about stuff that has to do with that conscious mind and unconscious mind, and how the observer, how the individual is meant to self-manage, What is your go-to? Are you going to come out and use analogies such as the mountain, such as other extreme sports, or are you going to use sort of, I don't want to, well, psychological references? Are you going to talk to their mind, explain how it works, and bring that up in the business world?
For sure, yes. Yeah. I think it's critically important that people understand how their mind works, you know, and so we can take those examples because they are so vivid that when there's something that is the difference between work and play, right? You know, Everest is extreme work, but it's all what we call it play, right? Work at times can be almost as extreme, but we call it work. But those words have got vast inferences on our psychology, right? They impact us tremendously because we've listened to our fathers and mothers and grandfathers and everybody say work is hard, work is difficult. There's a whole litany of social programming that goes along with the word work that we've been dipped into ever since childhood, right? And play has got a whole other litany of images that come to mind when we speak about play. So here we are engaged, we can engage in something quite extreme and call it play. We put the same sort of extreme and we call it work, and all of a sudden our enthusiasm drops and our performance drops and we want to get away from it, etc., etc. You know?
When it comes to marketing, I always think like, if it's not going to be work or play in those polar extremes, a nice middle ground is sometimes to use the word a calling. But not everyone understands that. But I find when we talk about a calling, it kind of merges the two. It's like, you know, it's work, but you're so engaged because you believe it's what you're there to do, and you intrinsically find that playful and rewarding. The calling is also a lot of research gone into that, reference to nuns and how they have perceived their work, their calling with religion.
Mm-hmm. Yes, no, that's a good example, actually. I mean, because if you look at often, you know, the habits of, say, nuns, you know, they are, you know, pretty strict, and yet they're often the devotion in their faces and in their being is very present, isn't it? It's very, very obvious, you know?
And they could be playful as well if they're in Sister Act. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to just bring up I have a little bit of a presentation on the side so we can keep track with our topics for tonight. I'm going to, actually, I'll have to share my screen first. Apologies. Because I want to really, maybe you can, in the interim while I'm doing this, have you had any stories that have come up where you've had somebody reject the kind of the mental positive attitude conversation, that they're just, no, you need to work harder. You don't need to be talking about any of this. It's literally, it's just do the work. Like, I don't want to talk about positive. I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to talk about psychology. Have you had that? And because I'm assuming your experience has offered some transient states, and you've seen how people have perhaps evolved in the business world to come on board with this. Do you have any?
Yes, yeah, exactly. You know, I've seen, you know, I've encountered it a lot. You know, that where people don't want to address certain things. They just want to, you know, almost like meat and potatoes. We just want to get the task done or brush things under the carpet. So,
and what is your reaction when someone says to you, "Oh, Martyn, come on, it's that positive mental attitude BS. It just doesn't work." You know, how is your go-to reaction?
Often, my go-to reaction is to look at some aspect of, if I know the person at all, then I look at, are they interested in sports? So I often use the sports analogy for them, you know, or even a Michael Jordan. I mean, everybody seems to know Michael Jordan. And so, you know, an example of Michael Jordan spending time visualizing his baskets, so that when he's in the middle of a game and he's fouled, he doesn't get nervous, and so literally he's overcome his nerves by visualization. So it's a very practical example of, and people can really relate because they know how nervous it would be if you're going to throw a basket, and if you miss, it's $5 million down the drain. Your sponsorship.
100%. Actually, when I had referenced those case studies that I read for the Everest climbers, the topic of those case studies were in reference to visual motor rehearsal, yes. So all the visualization and the difference between the novice and the expert, where that the expert climbers were much more habitual in visualizing the climb before it happens, visualizing if something's going to happen, how would they react, staying calm, etc. I know for myself, that's exactly how I would work in the under high stress conditions in the office. If you know that there are risks to mitigate, we have a risk register as well, but that's technical, right? So this is, sure, it's something that we're putting if then statements, we're going to do this, but that's all numbers and zeros and ones. What happens to the humanistic side when the risk is actually happening? How do people react? Did they have a bad day that morning? And did they visualize when the risk happens, how they're going to self-manage? So I love the concept of visualization. And sports is a great go-to. I know for myself, I've been involved, like I said, with IT a lot. So I tend to draw that parallel between how the brain works and how computing works in reference to a central processor. Let's say we discussed the idea of play and what happens if you overwork yourself. The same analogy is what happens if you were to overwork a CPU for too long. It would burn out. Even the technology components can't. You have fans that are cooling it, you have this and that, but at some point, everything just hangs. I mean, the old school blue screen of death was always pretty iconic. People understood that, but that's what I see. When I see people just sort of freak out, they can't deal with it anymore. It's as if they are now that blue screen of death, and instead of Control-Alt-Delete, it's go take a walk in nature.
Yes, yeah.
Go have a stretch, do some breathing meditation, do a mindfulness practice. That is the new Control-Alt-Delete.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, very interesting, because in some groups I've been working with recently, it's really become obvious that like one of the classic times for Control-Alt-Delete is about 3 p.m. when the to-do list is actually only increased and not gone down, and time is running out on the day. That's when the blue screen happens for people.
Which is just around the time of the sun setting, or depending what season we're in. But it follows that. And it's a buildup of overwhelm, isn't it? Yeah. Whenever I have to do, depending on the time of the year, if I have afternoon meetings, I'm very conscious of that, and I'll if I see people. Because some people have more tendency to down than others. The sundowning effect, I think it's called. I'm not quite forget. But then encouraging people to take a little exercise to get more oxygen in, perhaps have a coffee if that's their thing, or water. Just a simple glass of water sometimes will bring in enough energy into the body because you're dehydrated by that time of the day. All of those are great ideas. And what I'd like to know, and now moving through our topics, is... have you, I don't know if you're even aware of psychology, the original mission statement, because I know you're a business person as well. We always want to look at that mission statement concept. And I was quite fascinated when I found out that originally in the early 1900s, it was, I think the American Psychology Association was built first, and the American Psychology Association, that's right, the APA, they came in maybe around before 1920s, I think, and the Canadian Psychology Association in the 30s. And so in this early part of the 1900s, their original mission statement for psychology was, yes, cure mental illness. hands down. We all know that. But what I don't believe that many people know in the conversation is that they were also there to make life more productive and fulfilling, in the sense of, you know, that meaning and purpose discussion and the values from everything that came from philosophy, as well as nurture talents and strengths. I mean, those are wonderful things that I think would have really boosted the marketing strength and brand strength of psychology. But then what happened was we had our post-World Wars. You know, unfortunately, a really sad turn of events. You're having how many people come back with mental illness disorders of stress, post-traumatic stress disorder. They've got anxiety, depression, not bereavement, but loss, suffering, deep loss. There was no money. There was no more funding after that to go into any of the nurture people's strengths, nurture. And from then till literally the year 2000, there was never really much discussion about a concept around bringing those parts of the mission statement back. Like this idea of, well, I guess that's how this is in short, how it all came about as positive psychology, was that a gentleman at the time who was president of the APA 1999, moving into 2000, Martyn Seligman, had that call to action to bring out the researchers and have them reintroduce these missions, start focusing on researching what is going well with people. And, I find that if we look at like a timeline perspective, which I'm sharing for those who are able to see the video cast, but for those who are listening on the podcast, I'll verbally walk you through. We see the emergence of things that were more positive in reference to psychology coming out under Jung in 1933, and that was all about the meaning and purpose discussion. And I mean, still today, Jung psychology is an extremely value-add scenario. I know I constantly talk to myself nowadays around integration, you know, integrating all aspects of yourself so that you don't feel any disconnect and disjoint when you're making decisions, when you're doing stuff. And if we move forward from 1933, you can see these kind of peaks up and down where people have tried to keep the flame alive. We see 1939, they were researching giftedness, Terman. We see 51, a fully functional person, very popular from our management theory, which I'm sure if anyone knows anything about psychology and business, they're familiar with Maslow, hierarchy of needs, getting towards self-actualization, which was from the mid-50s to early 70s. A lot of research there. There was mental health in 58, development stages, 63. We got, again, the performance conversation from Valiant in 1977. And now we start getting into more of this positive psychology flavor. DC and Ryan, which I love, their self-determination theory. I think it's a brilliant concept and that was in 1985, the theory came out, where you have your competency, your autonomy, and your relatedness, which are those really intrinsically motivating ingredients that we need people to have in order to be self-motivated. You can't be behind them all the time with a stick, or you can't be always offering them a carrot. Like, there needs to be something more self-generating for them. So moving forward from 85 to 90, there's the flow concept, and Dr. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi is right up there in the positive psychology world. They're doing great work at the Claremont Graduate University. And his flow and optimal experience directly relates to sports psychology. I mean, none of these Olympic athletes are doing what they're doing without being in what he calls flow, that really focus with intent and purpose and absolutely zero distraction. The visualization, I'm sure, is a big component in that as well. And then we have Seligman, the sort of pioneer once again of this newer movement, who comes in around 1991, where he was always learning about helplessness until his young daughter tapped him on the shoulder and was like, what's going on? How come we're not talking about learning something more positive? Pardon me. At which point he kind of woke up and started saying, well, if we can learn helplessness, then we can probably learn other things like optimism. And I think that was kind of what started the whole flame. Optimism, and he has his well-being model for PERMA, which is, I think it's a really good model that's simple. Because one thing when we're talking about science, it can get complicated sometimes. And when we're talking about business, you got to be simple. People are managing huge budgets. They're working overtime. They're working really big. They're dealing with high stress, high visibility situations. Last thing they want is to take out a case study and read it, 20-page case study and try to decipher things. So from a marketing perspective, I would say keep it simple. So the PERMA model is very good, keeps it simple. Carol Riff and Singer brought in their psychological well-being, which I know in a little bit I'd like to talk to you about the word well-being, because for me, I really appreciate that word, workplace well-being. And this is all about brand today with our main topic. So at one point I want to just throw out a bunch of words and think, what are people really enjoying? And just to finish up the timeline, which brings us to Barbara Fredrickson in 2004, and with her brought in and build theory and focusing on positivity. And 2000, it all started in 2000. And it's kind of been on what we call a J-curve since then. All the research is pouring in. And the academic world, I guess, is an easy segue to education. So the education world is taking this on board. They're more interested at this point, I feel, in the positive psychology as a brand because it's got that academic flavor. However, I'm here for the business world. I really want to help these individuals out. And at sometimes, if you have children out there and they need to take medicine, they may not like it. So you have to be creative, right? You have to find ways to make it fun and fresh and taste good, hence the marketing discussion. So let's bring you back in the conversation. I wanted to just bring our audience up to par with where we are with this psychology timeline, why we called it positive psychology, or not me, but I should say Dr. Martyn Seligman. And where are you with your favorite words when it comes to psychology? Are you using well-being? Are you using positive psychology? Are you using optimization? Go for it.
Yeah, well-being I think is a great introductory word, and I think that it really resonates with people because they are looking for well-being. And then after that, though, I think that brain function is another word that really seems to be resonating with people a lot.
What was that word? Sorry.
Brain function.
Functioning, yes.
Yeah, or brain, how the brain functions. And so.
Like neuroscience more, but.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
They do seem very attracted to that, and that's not psychology. Because what we're trying to do here is we're trying to see what is the stigma.
Mm-hmm.
So please continue. We got the neuroscience, brain optimization, functioning,
wellness.
Wellness.
You see, I talk about our psychological makeup, and so and people seem to understand. People. Yes, let me engage in a discussion of my psychological makeup. Many managers and people in the workplace are quite interested in having that discussion. And then it starts to break then into various. It seems like a fairly safe discussion to have.
Mm-hmm. But they're so personal, these discussions, and I think that the discussions are easier to have when they're within cultures that are more accepting of a growth mindset.
Yes.
So I know you know what I mean by that, and we'll share with our audience. If your work culture is more of a blame culture and constantly looking and judging for mistakes and pointing those out to a point where you don't feel safe anymore to even make a mistake, that's quite unfortunate, because there has been no success without mistakes. We can look, you mentioned Michael Jordan again, and I know sports psychology people are all over this. You better be ready to miss 1,000 baskets to get there. And that kind of concept. But if I went into, as let's say a young a debutante project manager going in for the first time, and during my interview, I'm like, oh, I love making mistakes. I can make them all the time. It's probably like, next. What we need to, as a stigma as well, it's associated to this mistake. Anything that's a sign of weakness. This I put up on the visual slide here for those who are watching. We have the definition of stigma, that is a visible sign or mark of disgrace, disease, dysfunction. And that's really comes down to perspective. So have you been in more environments that have broken these stigmas down and allowed for that growth culture, or have you felt more the opposite?
No, I've fortunately been working a lot in corporations and in corporate settings where it has been broken down quite a bit. But still, even there, it's not. You talked about blame keeping things locked in place and keeping things stagnant and stopping growth. But even on the, it seems like stigmas are still an undercurrent, no matter, or can be an undercurrent no matter where. It's very hard to remove all stigmas. One corporation I was working with recently, they literally said, I was talking about conflict, and they said, well, we don't have conflict. We only focus, we do everything through agreement. And so that's the level of functionality that they've managed to achieve in a fairly small corporation,
It's interesting, because even from a positive psychology perspective, I'm sure there'd be some or many that would argue about the positive benefits to having some healthy debate, and you can't have consensus all the time, especially when you're talking about stuff that is very values driven, and that state of, I don't want to say argument. What was the word you had used?
Did I use agreement? I think it was conflict and agreement.
Conflict, yes. So the conflict is actually a mechanism to breed creativity as well. And without conflict, for example, I've worked with some senior leaders where we had them all doing their strengths assessments, and then I put them up as a group, and they come to a very visual realization that, wow, we are all almost identical. And what we know from that is then we have this culture of groupthink, which makes it very easy, makes no conflict, but it also means that there's not going to be much innovation going on, because no one's really challenging to go that deviant way, if you will, to have something more creative come up. It'll just be easy going. So, and that's what I like about this whole discussion. There's no right or wrong, right? It's very organic, and whatever works best for whichever organization or person or community, etc.
But I really agree with you, though, that the culture of the organization has a huge effect on the overall performance, and cultures that have these blame elements in them, they tend to get stuck much easier. They tend to be harder to move in ways that serve them, etc., etc. So it's you
It's
know,
tricky. It's a
what I see happening on the planet, though, is that, we're evolving, very rapidly, individually, collectively, and corporately too. So what is happening in corporations is very rapid shifts are happening in terms of the corporate structures that are much more along the line of almost based on positive psychology, and in many instances. And other corporations that aren't that way, I don't know what will happen, but it seems likely they'll get left behind if they don't.
Yeah, I mean, it may work for them tactically for now. What will happen in the long run? As I said, we don't carry a magic ball with us. However, the organization, I always look at it as something that's inorganic, right? It's not something that's living. So it can tolerate high stress. We're talking about something that is, I don't know how to explain it. Like it's an organization. However, the people within the organization, how sustainable are they going to be within that organization depending on its culture? And that's, I always go back to, I take a step back and look at it from that humanistic side. I mean, actually, from a branding perspective, many people perceive positive psychology as a rebrand of humanistic psychology. And there is no company that exists that doesn't have a human within it. Whether it's one, whether it's many, a company doesn't exist without. So I can't, I'm very open to have these open discussions, and I want to tap into the real world with individuals bringing in their stories so that we can unpack stuff and better understand it. But for me, I already drank the Kool-Aid like a long time ago. It's a no-brainer situation. If you have a brain, you want to make sure you're using it to your advantage. And that is that, for me, the tool is being this positive psychology world. What about asking for help and things like self-care, which all also fall under the banner of this of positive psychology? Do you think those are still stigmatized in reference to, I'm thinking of, let's say, somebody who's really overworked at work and they're having, a problem in their personal life, which is very normal. I mean, things are not, it's not always peaches and cream everywhere, but they're afraid, once again, because of this culture of being judged or et cetera, of being perceived as weak or dysfunctional, and they're not asking for help.
Yes, I think that's common even in the most sort of open corporate cultures, because it's part of the human makeup to when we do feel stressed or feel like asking for help. Typically, we tend to withdraw rather than ask for help, don't we? That's how often we function. We tend to withdraw rather than ask for help. And so, even if the corporate culture is somewhat available to help us, I think many people tend not to take advantage of it.
And the irony in that is that we as human beings, as a species, have evolved to be community givers, to play nice and help each other and derive all the positive benefits that come out from that. So it's like, by blocking that for whatever old management theories that we may have existing, it's almost like we're blocking our evolution as humans. It's quite intriguing to me. I always have this like a double take. I'm really thinking through when I see things going, I wonder what they're perceiving to do that. Like, what motivates them to do that? Well, I know that the self-care discussion too is a big one for clients, and I see it all the time, where imagine somebody could be not performing for a whole week because they didn't take one day to self-care. And everyone thinks that's cool. They would rather 20% every day that you don't take a day off versus taking a day off and performing at 80% the remaining 4 days. Like, and this is what I think from a marketing perspective, why I like the science is that it comes with data. It comes with numbers. So we're not talking about life coaching here. We're not talking about, and the wellness, as much as I love it as a word, that as well, if it's not coming with these data points, it's not as strong. And when we get into the workplace, when we get into those companies and those organizations, we need to be prepared to talk data, talk statistics, and put it out there.
Yeah.
Do you have any experiences with that?
Yeah, no, I agree totally. No, I every time I have access to some data, then people perk right up. And it seems like it's finally we've got something to justify what we thought in our hearts or we felt in our hearts was the right thing to do. You know, so often these things they're going against the current, but people feel they're the right things to do. But it's when the data arrives that they say, okay, now we have the tool to implement, you know?
It's craziness. I know, like we're not at a point where we'll accept our intuition yet, but
that's right.
We will accept a spreadsheet 100% and a nice pie chart.
Yeah.
Well, for those who are interested in data, we have on our website, when you're there, the ability to download a recent case study with a large organizational program we rolled out. It was a 3-month training program bringing in positive psychology tools. And it was really appreciated at the end to have those data points to demonstrate to the senior leadership team and say, look, this is what happened. We had our pre-baseline, we had our post, and visually seeing there was the big increase was engagement with teams, team spirit, team engagement, because you're talking, it's like you're bringing all the tribes back together, and through that, they are getting more engaged, they are getting more excited. We were talking about strengths, and that really brings through engagement and having people talk about each other's strengths openly. The other thing was having these tools like mindfulness, breathing exercises, or et cetera, for the self-care portion, brought down emotions like anger 12%. I mean, so you think, like, unless the organization is a UFC fighting championship, okay, well, maybe anger is good at that point. But if we're talking about the standard, I don't know, any kind of business-driven organization, do we really want that aggressivity? That I won't even say aggressivity, because this is pure anger, emotion. It's a negative emotion. So no, and of course, positive emotion had went up. I think it was 8%, 6 or 8%. So I invite people to check out the case study if they like. From a marketing perspective as well, because that's the topic of today, I'm going to try to play this little video here. It should play for everyone. Nod your head if you hear the audio. Just want to make sure. And what this is a Canadian insurance company, Sonnet Insurance, and it came out, I don't know, I guess I remember seeing it about 3 to 6 months ago. And I try to always capture these little commercials where they're bringing in the elements of positive psychology, but for their own purposes. And I just, at the end of it, I just start laughing, going, c'est pas rapport, like there's no relationship between the word that they're dropping at the end, which is that fun, fresh buzzword, and the product. But nevertheless, I appreciate these companies who are at least using their funds to bring this to light, whether it is for the purpose of selling or not. At least we're getting more marketing around positive terms. I'll try it out. Can you hear it?
He took us to the stars. Overcame countless obstacles. It wasn't a single bright mind or money or politics. No, it was something much more powerful. 3, 2, 1. And there it is. Optimism. It made us believe there can be an insurance company Canadians actually like. Optimistic? Yes.
This was FYI, everybody, this was not a paid advertisement at all. So intriguing, though, that they use this conversation around optimism, and they do it so beautifully. Like, I think the video is really well done, really inspiring, and it's just associated to insurance, which I don't really see the link, but I see the power of optimism. Dr. Seligman would probably be pretty impressed too. Okay.
Yeah, I like it a lot. It was great.
Yeah. Well, and I think, to me, it's, from my perspective, the more we see it, the more it sensitizes people, and the more it grows this conversation, popularizes words like optimism. I would rather that than pessimism, 100%. So however it's bleeding into the media, whether it's through sports celebrities like Michael Jordan, I mean, God, there's so many. A lot of them are on the mindfulness train. I know I have examples there from videos of sports and celebrities, even like Hugh Jackman, big fan of mindfulness, doesn't really do anything without meditating. His is transcendental meditation. So, but everyone's got their own flavor, and that's another thing that's important, right? It's whatever works for them, whatever works for you, whatever works for myself, and not being judgmental or pushy, saying, you got to do this to feel good, and you got to do that. So we've talked about the marketing concept of this positive psychology. We've thrown out the words. We've talked about, my favorite's workplace wellness. I really think that is I don't know, for me, but positive psychology is still the tool. It may not be the driving communication out there. It might be a bit sensitive, but well-being and wellness, employee wellness, these are all great terms. And if we really want to help people to better market the brand of positive psychology, or anything that's speaking to this positive mental attitude, I put up on the slide here some easy kind of tips. And the first tip is to start a conversation. This is what we're doing right now, and I'm really appreciative, Martyn, that you're on board talking with us about this, sharing your experiences, because through the conversation, that's how people learn. Not everyone's going to learn like myself, reviewing 20-page case studies and talking to PhDs and et cetera. We're going to learn at the water cooler at work, talking about, hey, did you know that your brain is like over 80% water? And if you're dehydrated, we might not be really optimizing our thoughts properly. This is the kind of fluid stuff. We also want to talk in kind of scientific terms, in the sense of data. So I really love that rigor, and it's not just something that, I don't know, that we picked up off the back of a truck, or it's not just, what worked for somebody and now it's got to work for everybody. This is research that very intelligent people have carried out over sometimes very long periods of time, to be credible and be rigorous with their work, to make sure that there is a statistical significance coming out, that it's not just 1 out of 1,000,000 that this worked for, but it's a very high percentage, or at least a percentage that is something significant, as we say. So we look at relationships that are correlative, or relationships that are causal, and from a cause and effect perspective, I think to date the only real causal relationship out there in positive psychology is still a bidirectional one, where under the research of Sonia Lubomirsky for Science of Happiness, was that we always knew that success created happiness, as in, like, people who are successful are going to be happy about that. It's very rewarding. However, through her findings, she also brought forth that happy people create success. And this is one of our main platforms as well, is that if we can tweak and work the well-being of employees in the office so that they're less stressful and that they're enjoying more positive emotion, which is fueling that state of happiness, then that will create success for them and in turn success for the entire organization. And it's kind of a very utopic win-win, if you want.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I really agree with that, because I see time and again that when as soon as we move into any sort of depression or failure feelings, then our performance drops off. So our performance is like a yo-yo. We're feeling good, goes up. We get depressed, our performance goes down again. So it's like this up and down, up and down, up and down. And if we can reduce the ups and downs, then what happens is that when failure happens, and instead of going into, say, in a sales team, the big sale doesn't come through, the team can either go into a slump for some days, or it can pick its boots up and slap each other on the back and say, we did our best, let's move on, and get right back out of it. And that makes a critical difference in the sales performance over the year, and also in the well-being of everybody on the team too, because when you have everybody going home, sad because of the failure, that ripples out into home life, etc., etc. Whereas when the team has learned how to handle those things, then they go home as well. They carry that into home life, and that affects how they do in their leisure time too. So it's having a ripple effect out into the whole, not just in the work, but also into their whole life.
I totally am on board with that. I look at that aspect too as like resilience. Everyone's so concerned at the office of being reactive and tactical. That the concept of strategy and making the distance with endurance, as you're saying, instead of these high peaks and valleys, more slow growth, slow and steady wins the race in that perspective. I don't know why, but I always think of the Buddhist mentality and living in the middle. You don't want to have these really high peaks and these really bad lows. You just want to be content with an upward growth. I like that conversation. The other 2 points, or actually 3 points that I put forward, were we always want to solve problems. If we're marketing this stuff, positive psychology is solving a huge problem. We're solving the ability to deal with high stress conditions. We're solving resilience, as we just discussed, so people can bounce back, so that they're not eating up the resources of the organization for short and long-term disabilities or absenteeism, whether it be physical or mental. I mean, the whole engagement conversation of they're at their desk, but they're checked out. They're on Facebook, or they're planning their party, or etc. So definitely solving problems. To me, I see that, and I would encourage people in their marketing to really talk about that, whether it's for well-being, whether it's for psychology, etc. Keeping it simple. Can you agree with me on that?
Yeah, for sure.
You lose people the minute we start talking too technical, if things are too long, too drawn out, gone. You got to keep it simple. And my last point is all about making it fun through gamifying. I know that I had the most success in reference to, like, from feedback. It was always about we want more. They refer it as team building. People always think about it as team building, but I think team building is just what the corporate mind thinks.
Yes.
However, it's really gamification. It's really just making things fun, letting people play at work and learning through the play.
Yeah, I agree totally. I think there's that's a whole area of expansion in corporate expansion that is really ripe for. It has huge potential, to make even more work into a game.
And when people are having fun, we'll say, and kind of surfing that positive emotion vibe, they are more, anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, but from my recollection of everything that I've come across, it's easier to recall in our long-term memories if we can associate it to the emotional part of our brain. And I would rather have an association with a positive emotional experience than a negative one. So if we can make things playful, then people will remember it more often. And at that point, you're getting the return on investment, if you will, from having people learn coping strategies, learning optimization strategies. Before, I know we're going to be wrapping up soon. So what's your favorite, what's your favorite thing to market to companies? I don't mean like you as a business. I'm just saying, like, if you were to go in and you had your elevator pitch to talk about one thing, what would it be to somebody who's in an influential role at an organization that's in the context of positive psychology and well-being?
I think it depends. I normally try to understand what that problem is, and then
Now that's the great consultant for you.
I help us come up with a solution for them, you know?
But let's say it was a vanilla requirement, and it was more for you. We want you to pitch us. What's your fave?
Then it would be. I'm really enjoying even these corporate concepts such as productivity and how to make productivity. How to increase productivity, but applying all, if they're open to having every tool applied, then it can be massive fun.
Yeah, okay, like a program to improve a process of productivity.
That's right, yes. And if they're open to every tool, including meditation and,
No, I didn't put you in a trick spot, but I understand what you mean. So, especially from a consulting background, you always want to be holistic, systems thinking approach, not just throw one little thing in because it might actually do nothing, even though in somewhere else it could be the most powerful tool. So It really depends on the environment. I can say that for myself, one of the faves still like ongoing, and I think it's going to pique an interest with you, is that micro meditations of the breathing meditation, just calming the mind down for 2 minutes. There is no excuse in any professional setting to not give yourself the permission to calm your mind for 2 minutes.
Yeah. No, I agree. I totally agree with that. That's one of the first things I talk to people about. The first thing I really stress is how you start your day. And so what do you, so visualize your day before you leave home,
Yeah.
And visualize the day you want.
The visualization, well, especially as somebody who climbed Everest, I'm sure you visualized it a lot.
Yeah.
Well, Martyn, I really appreciate your attendance and participation on this. I hope it also grows the conversation for all our listeners for the video podcast, I should say, and the viewers of the video cast as we put everything up in on our website and our social media fronts. Thank you once again. Please keep doing what you're doing. I love how active you are. Your mind is your mind and body very active. Anything new, like kind of, is there another Everest? Is there another big exciting thing that you didn't talk much about coming back from India? It would have been nice to hear the flavor of what's going on out there. We'll have to save it for another conversation. But anything on the radar coming up?
I'm in the summer. I'll be hiking in the mountains for sure.
Okay.
Which mountains? Yeah, either the Canadian Rockies or in the
lucky you.
Yes. Yeah.
I just get out to the Adirondacks when I can. It's close enough.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Anything to be in nature, right?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, thank you very much once again. Thank you to my team here at Brain Advisor. Thank all of you who have been listening. Please, if you feel this is going to help grow the conversation, share it with your listeners, share it with your communities as well. This is Jason Potvin, host of Brain Advisor's live podcast series, signing out. And we'll see you next week for emotional intelligence. We have Sarah Jenner with us from Mindful Employer Canada, who's going to be openly talking about her favorite discussion of emotional intelligence. And as a bonus, Sarah actually worked on the Canadian National Standard, not on the Canadian National Standard, but on a parallel project that offered video tutorials in order to introduce the Canadian National Standard. We're going to talk a bit more about that when she's on board, and hope you'll be there. Thank you, everyone. Stay positive. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Martyn. Bye-bye.